from a presentation, and I show you the link to the presentation on the next slide. And both ways, if you fly on the left-hand side or if you don't fly on the right-hand side, it has different kind of emotions. It can have positive emotions or negative emotions. So if you fly, there can be pleasure, pride, relaxation, excitement. But on the negative side, if you fly, there can be stress, loneliness, fatigue, and guilt. If you don't fly, there can be guilt, sadness, anger, fear, confusion, but there can also be relief, and of course, many other emotions. And I think it's important not to underestimate that. And I want to show you a few statements. They are just really very few from strong emotional responses, particularly at the beginning of the project, but occasionally even later. And one argument was, of course, we need to fly to be successful. That's why I'm so happy about the study by Wines and Donner, because there is no obvious proof that it really makes a difference. Another reason or another argument was that we hate flying, but we sacrifice ourselves for the good of science and for the good of ETH. Another argument was that ETH is best to provide technological solutions, and my contribution is small. We know that from the climate discussions in general. And what I find quite interesting, and that was in the survey last year, only mediocre researchers want to reduce and support the reduction. So from all these responses, and I want to show you what are possible ways to deal with that. I think it's good to know about that and to be able to pick it up. And I think with facts and figures, it's possible to emphasize the importance of the topic. So if you have, if you can argue 60% of the total emissions of ETH are from flights, it's more difficult to say this is not an important topic. I also think it's really difficult to acknowledge difficulties because it is a difficult topic in the current scientific system. It's particularly for young researchers, it's difficult to tackle that. I also think that role models, so respected and top scientists, are very important. Picking up the argument that only mediocre researchers want to tackle the problem. So I think they are best to transfer the topic. What I really want to emphasize is the top-down commitment and the bottom-up involvement to support and to empower people. I think also it's important no blaming or finger pointing, but on my last slide with the lessons learned, I will point out transparency. And for me, this is a different topic. Very important for us was that we don't want to have an impediment of the career chances of young scientists in the current scientific system, but that's why I found this survey so interesting. Particularly the young scientists are much more ambitious with a reduction target. I also think we have a responsibility as a state-funded university, and the project wants to support with ideas and tools so people don't want to feel overwhelmed. And if you want to see more about that topic, you can go to that link. It was a lunch talk from the University of St. Gallen. This is my last slide with the lessons learned. And what I really found important is the top-down support. And the top-down support is probably the most fragile support. And if you lose that, it will be really difficult to do a cultural change. And I think this kind of topic, this kind of transformation is a real cultural change. So I think I can't overestimate or overemphasize how important the top-down support is. But, and I think that's for us, the combination was so important. The travel decisions are made bottom-up by individuals. So it's important to involve all staff and students and not just the interested individuals. Transparency, I think, is a really powerful tool. And as I said, this is no finger pointing or blaming and shaming. But if you, for example, see the emissions of other groups or other departments or faculties, it's much easier to discuss it and to start an interaction. And I have one example that one of the departments, once a year in their departmental conference, they show the emissions per group with name. And there you can have a look, okay, is my colleague with a different kind of topic who has an ERC like I do, why is he flying? Why are his emissions only a third of mine? And then you can start discussing it. I also think that a good database for monitoring is important, because then you can get graphs where you can go back to the departments and go into a discussion. Okay, from the figures, your reduction is mostly with the students, and this is not really the idea. I also think what I said, the important role of champions and influencers and the trend setting, and that's why I'm so grateful for networks like this one. They are very important because we need a common approach of many organizations to be successful. And my conclusion is that we do need a cultural change, and we have to rethink our scientific system and its current practices. And that includes scientific exchange, the conference organization, teaching, evaluation criteria, and also the funding schemes. With that, thank you very much. And I'm happy to take up any questions.
Super, thanks, Susann, for a good example. So maybe since questions are just coming in the chat and in the Q&A, so please add more or write down more questions. So ETH was one of the first, I would say, or one of the leaders. So what was the most important thing at the start? Because you also start, I mean, you have data from 2006, which I guess most institutes don't have. And for us, this was one problem. So we did the survey ourselves at the institute to get these data. So what I think is the most important thing you experienced to get started, and then also what was the most important thing to convince people to make changes? Yeah.
Okay, first of all, we do have the data since 2006, because as I mentioned, the governing board decided then to reduce the flight emissions within a few years by 50%. And then they found out that we don't have any figures. So the flight reduction didn't occur, as you've seen, but since then we do have the emissions. It was a different system it was a different monitoring system, very rough. We had for 25% of the flights, we have the destination, so we had a cost calculation factor. And when I started the project in 2017, I thought this would still be good enough, but there was such a strong opposition from the departments, and they wanted to have much better figures on the individual group level, which I fully understand, that the group level is important. So I thought before the project fails, we need to set up a new monitoring system. And that was quite extensive to start that. And you find the documents, how we did that and so on the website. Sorry, there was your second part of the question was, why did we start it, and what were the problems?
So what was the point that you think resonated the most with the professors or staff that you could make? So was it really the data that made the difference, or was it just, I don't know, climate change in general, or was it, I don't know?
I think the facts and figures really helped, but there was, in 2017, there were really a few points where I wasn't sure if the project would continue. And for me, the turning point was that beginning of 2018, I organized a meeting with all the departments, and I had representatives for each department. And I asked them to present their proposed reduction targets. And that was quite interesting because, and we did that as a kind of little conference with little posters. And at that meeting, we had, and that's why I think the role models and the respected persons are so important. We had about a third of the departments, the representatives, and there were all professors there, that they told the others, we know this is a really difficult topic, but we have no choice. And for me, that was really the turning point for the project. And after that, the discussion was really a different kind of discussion. Not everybody is or was convinced. I think that is really difficult. But that's why I think you have to provide tools, support, but you do need the respected persons to go ahead, basically.
So one question from Sarah is what do you think will be the level in 2021 or 2022?
I believe, okay, I don't know. And I have to say, it's nothing I will influence any further because I will leave ETH. But I would very much hope that ETH will continue to be a leader to change, to go ahead changing the scientific system. I think it's not a small task. It's not just about replacing flights by train. I think it's really to tackle how the scientific system and the exchange works.
Yeah, so a follow-up question from Brandon Roos from EMBL is more or less, you reach now 15% reduction. How can you get to 15? So you took the approach from the voluntary targets. So now the real, and I guess in Switzerland there will be also targets from the state. So how do you get to the 50% reduction?
Yeah, I mean, originally, the first one in 2018, the overall ETH reduction, and the range was between 3% for one department to 50% to 30% for another department. So overall, originally was 11%. And we all knew that just wasn't enough. But I wasn't so concerned because I thought we started a process, and that was much more important. And indeed, this year, the department who decided on 3% reduction, which was really nothing over 6 years, raised it to 30%. So there was a discussion really ongoing in the department. And another department, and that's the physics department, they have a really interesting website, by the way, what they want to do about sustainability. They raised the reduction target to 50%. So that's why we've got the overall 15%, but that by far is not enough, and we know that. Yes, so ETH wants to get net zero by 2030, and the flights are, of course, the most important emission lever. Currently, we have no top-down stick, basically. But I think with the surveys, there is an ongoing discussion. And of course, there is the discussion in society, which is very different to 2017. And I really want to emphasize that as well. I think 2017 was a different time to 2021 now. So it will be much easier and there will be less resistance, but it's not easy, nevertheless.
Yeah, there's one question from Sophia. I guess this is one that always comes back is how do you deal with data protection? Because you get people's individual data and then I guess you summarize it on group or departments level. Is that yes. The way it's done at ETH or?
Yes, we had that question internally. We discussed it as well in 2017. And with a new monitoring system, each group or each budget responsible person can access in our SAP financial system the emissions of the own group. And that I think is really important, that you as a group leader, you can continuously access your flight emissions and look at it. On the higher level, the controllers can access it. And there are very few people at ETH who have an overview. So that way, we didn't encounter any problem with the data protection. And of course, if a department decides they want to make public the emissions of a group with name, that's up to the department then.
Yeah, super. I think we'll have one final question and then we'll move on to Leo. From Valerie is at King's College. She asked if the visiting international students were also included, because I guess more and more students use Erasmus or whatever projects to come, and how at what university is that then calculated? And the second question is, do you have any university plan to promote alternative ways of traveling like trains?
Yeah. Both. I'm happy to answer both questions. The students, I think, are really important. They are important in many ways. I mean, they're the future generation. It's their world we are talking about in the next 20 or 15 years and so on. And that's why we included them. It's more difficult to get the remissions. It was occasionally a bit of a pain, but I think it's important, and our system boundary are all the emissions as part of the curriculum, because that's the responsibility of ETH, what kind of excursions ETH offers. So that was the system boundary. So if an incoming students do get, if they get ECTS, they will be accounted for. The second, sorry, I forgot the second question.
Was
yes, the flights, yeah, flight and train. Yes, yeah. We just changed our travel policy and said that under 8 hours, we strongly recommend. There is no must, but we strongly recommend taking the train. That if the budget owner agrees, you can take a first class journey. So yes, we do promote train instead of the flight, but it's a bit of a complex discussion, I think, because as I said, 90% are long distance flights. So I think it's important to talk about alternative ways of travel, but it doesn't have the lever. So what I want to prevent in the discussion is that people think, okay, I take the train for a few destinations like Berlin or so, and the long distance flights I ignore. But they are the difficult part, and they have the lever with 90%. But nevertheless, the short distance are important, so people discuss about it.
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot, Susann.